At 9:47 p.m. in Buckhead's wealthiest neighborhood, a Maid's scream shattered 18 years of carefully constructed lies. Behind a billionaire's bathroom wall, she found what wasn't supposed to exist, a hidden child whose mother had been erased from history. The baby monitor in her hands wasn't picking up sound from upstairs. It was broadcasting from a secret chamber that held evidence of a woman who vanished after Hurricane Katrina. Have you ever stumbled upon a secret that could destroy lives? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. This isn't just about a hidden baby. This is about how power silences the powerless, how wealth buries truth. Stay with me as we uncover how one woman's courage exposed a billionaire's darkest secret and brought justice to a mother the world forgot. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered how the powerful get away with the unthinkable, this story will change how you see the world. Hit that like button and subscribe because what happens next will shock you to your core. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Lorraine Tucker had cleaned enough rich people's houses to know the rules. Don't touch what doesn't belong to you. Don't ask questions about locked doors. Don't notice the things that don't make sense. But rules don't mean much when you hear a baby crying at nearly 10 o'clock at night in a house that's supposed to be empty. She'd been scrubbing the marble floors of Bradley Whitmore's Buckhead mansion for 3 hours, her knees aching from the cold stone. The weekend cleaning gig paid double her usual rate, but it came with strict instructions. No personal items in the house. No phone calls. No visitors. Especially no children. That last rule stung. Lorraine's 8-year-old daughter Keisha was staying with her grandmother again, missing another bedtime story because mommy had to work. The guilt sat heavy in her chest as she moved through rooms bigger than her entire apartment in Savannah. The baby monitor crackled to life in the kitchen drawer where she'd found it an hour earlier. She'd assumed it was broken, left behind by accident. Rich people threw away more functioning electronics than she'd owned in her lifetime. Then came the sound that made her blood freeze. A baby's cry, clear and desperate, coming through the static. Lorraine dropped her cleaning supplies and grabbed the monitor. The LED lights danced across the small screen, showing signal strength that shouldn't exist in an empty house. She followed the sound up the curved staircase, her heart hammering against her ribs. The crying grew louder as she approached the master suite. The bathroom door stood slightly open, steam still clinging to the mirror from a shower someone had taken hours ago. But Bradley Whitmore was in Dubai on business. His wife was visiting family in Connecticut. The house should be tomb quiet. The monitor's signal peaked near the linen closet. Lorraine pressed her ear to the door and heard something that made no sense. Muffled crying, like it was coming from behind the wall itself. Her fingers found a small handle hidden behind the towels. The panel slid open silently, revealing a narrow corridor that shouldn't exist in any blueprint. What she found on the other side changed everything. A makeshift nursery, cramped but carefully maintained. A crib with clean sheets. Baby formula and diapers stacked on makeshift shelves. Medical equipment humming quietly in the corner. And in the center of it all, a baby who couldn't be more than 6 months old, crying for someone who wasn't coming. Lorraine's hands shook as she lifted the child, a beautiful mixed-race infant with skin the color of caramel and eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. The baby calmed immediately in her arms, tiny fingers grasping her cleaning uniform like a lifeline. A post-it note stuck to the crib's railing caught her. Do not open unless everything falls apart. Everything already had. Taped to the inside wall was a manila envelope marked with a single word, insurance. Inside, Lorraine found photographs, bank records, and a cell phone that powered on when she pressed the button. The last text message sent from the phone was dated 3 weeks ago. She's getting sicker. You promised you'd handle this. The baby whimpered against her shoulder, and Lorraine felt something crack open in her chest. This child wasn't just hidden. She was abandoned. Left in a secret room, like evidence someone hoped would disappear. But who leaves a baby behind a bathroom wall? And why? The answer lay in the leather journal wrapped in silk at the bottom of the envelope. The cover was embossed with initials, JW. The first page was dated 18 years ago, written in careful handwriting that grew more desperate with each entry. He says he loves me, but love doesn't hide in shadows. Love doesn't make promises it can't keep. I'm starting to think Bradley Whitmore's idea of love is just another word for control. Lorraine's breath caught. She was holding evidence that could destroy the man whose floors she'd been scrubbing for months. The philanthropist who smiled for magazine covers and donated millions to charity had a secret that could unravel everything. But as she looked down at the baby in her arms, a child who'd been living in hiding for months, maybe longer, Lorraine realized something more terrifying than Bradley's secrets. This wasn't just about covering up an affair or hiding an illegitimate child. The medical equipment, the careful monitoring, the complete isolation. Someone had been keeping this baby alive, but invisible, hidden from a world like she didn't deserve to exist. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Keisha's asking when you're coming home. What should I tell her? Lorraine looked at the baby in her arms, then at the journal that held the secrets of a woman named JW, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She wasn't just cleaning houses anymore. She was about to clean up 18 years of lies. Have you ever held someone else's secret in your hands and known it could destroy them? Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and doing what's right? Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in Lorraine's position, because what she decided next would expose more than just Bradley Whitmore's hidden child. She was about to uncover the truth about a woman who vanished during Hurricane Katrina, a woman whose story was buried so deep that even her own daughter didn't know she existed. The journal's pages told a story that made Lorraine's stomach turn. Janelle Washington had been 22 when Hurricane Katrina destroyed her life in New Orleans. Like thousands of others, she'd lost everything: her apartment, her job, her sense of safety. The relief shelter in the 9th Ward became home, and that's where she met Bradley Whitmore. He doesn't look like the other volunteers, Janelle had written. His clothes cost more than I made in 6 months, but his hands aren't soft. He works in the kitchen beside me, carrying heavy pots and cleaning up messes. When he looks at me, I feel seen for the first time since the storm. Lorraine shifted the baby to her other arm and kept reading. The entries painted Bradley as a man who seemed different from his wealthy background. Someone who stayed after the cameras left, who helped rebuild homes instead of just writing checks. He says I'm beautiful, not just my body, but my mind. He wants to know what I think about everything: politics, music, my dreams for the future. No one's ever cared about my thoughts before. The early entries glowed with the kind of hope that made Lorraine's heart ache. She'd been Janelle's age once, believing that love could bridge any gap, that good intentions mattered more than reality. But the tone shifted as months passed. Bradley says we have to be careful about being seen together. He has business associates who wouldn't understand our relationship. I thought love was supposed to be something you showed off, not something you hid. The baby started fussing, and Lorraine found a bottle in the small refrigerator humming in the corner. As she fed the child, she continued reading about how Bradley moved Janelle to Atlanta, set her up in an apartment in Macon, and visited her twice a week. I'm pregnant. When I told him, his face went completely blank. Then he smiled and said we'd figure out together. But he hasn't been back in 2 weeks. The entries became sparse, filled with doctor's appointments and legal meetings Janelle didn't understand. Bradley's lawyers handled everything: the prenatal care, the birth preparations, the paperwork that Janelle signed without reading. They say it's for the baby's protection, that having Bradley's name on official documents would make us targets. I don't understand why loving someone has to be so complicated. Lorraine felt sick reading about the birth. Janelle delivered alone, except for medical staff who wouldn't make eye contact. Bradley visited once for 10 minutes and left an envelope of cash on the bedside table. She's beautiful. Mixed babies are supposed to be pretty, but she's perfect. Her eyes are mine, but her nose is his. I named her Hope because that's all I have left. The final entries were desperate. Hope's been sick for weeks. The doctors say she needs surgery, but Bradley's lawyers say the medical trust fund is temporarily unavailable. How is my daughter's heart surgery temporarily unavailable? I called Bradley directly for the first time in months. He wouldn't take my call. I went to his house in Buckhead tonight. The security guard wouldn't let me through the gate. He said Mr. Whitmore doesn't know anyone named Janelle Washington. Like I never existed. Like Hope never existed. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago. They took her. Bradley's people came with legal papers and medical authorizations I signed years ago without understanding. They said Hope needed immediate surgery and I couldn't afford it. They said they'd take care of everything. They said I could see her after she recovered. I haven't heard anything in 2 weeks. When I call the hospital, they say there's no record of my daughter. When I call Bradley's office, they say he's unavailable. I've been erased from my own child's life. If anything happens to me, if I disappear like they want me to, I hope someone finds this journal. I hope someone knows that Hope Washington exists, that she deserves better than being hidden like a shameful secret. The journal ended there. Lorraine's hands trembled as she closed the leather cover. The baby, Hope, had fallen asleep in her arms, tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. But nothing about this situation was peaceful. Janelle Washington had been systematically erased from her own daughter's life. Her phone calls ignored, her existence denied, her child hidden behind a bathroom wall like evidence of crime. But where was Janelle now? Lorraine picked up the cell phone from the envelope and scrolled through recent messages. The last conversation was between Janelle and an unknown number. You said I could see her after the surgery. It's been 2 weeks. Complications arose. She needs more time to recover. I want to see my daughter. Now. That's not possible. Please trust the process. I'm going to the police. That would be unwise. Think about what's best for Hope. The final message from Janelle was sent at 11:47 p.m. 3 weeks ago. I'm driving to Atlanta tonight. You can't keep me from my own child. There were no messages after that. Lorraine felt cold certainty settle in her bones. Janelle Washington hadn't just been erased from her daughter's life. She'd been erased completely. And now Lorraine was holding the evidence that could prove it. The baby stirred in her arms, opening eyes that held flecks of gold. Eyes that would never see their mother again unless someone spoke for the woman who'd been silenced. Have you ever realized that someone's entire existence had been wiped away? That a mother's love had been treated like an inconvenience to be managed? Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever had someone try to erase your story. Because Lorraine was about to make sure Janelle Washington's voice was heard, even if powerful people had made sure she couldn't speak for herself anymore. Lorraine sat on the bathroom floor of a billionaire's mansion, holding a baby who officially didn't exist and evidence that could destroy one of Atlanta's most powerful men. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from her mother. Keisha would be wondering why Mommy wasn't home for their Sunday night movie. The normal world, her world of rent payments and grocery lists and bedtime stories, felt impossibly far away. But looking down at Hope's sleeping face, Lorraine knew she couldn't pretend this wasn't happening. The smart thing would be to put the baby back, close the hidden door, and finish her cleaning job. Walk away like she'd never seen anything. Bradley Whitmore paid her $800 cash for weekend work, more than she made in 2 weeks at her day job. She needed this money. But smart and right weren't always the same thing. The cell phone buzzed with an incoming text to Janelle's number. Status update required. Lorraine stared at the message. Someone was still monitoring this phone, still expecting reports about Hope. The baby wasn't just hidden, she was being managed like a business problem. Her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. Where is Janelle? The response came immediately. That's not your concern. Maintain current protocols. I want to see her. That's not possible. Continue care as instructed. Lorraine's blood went cold. Whoever was texting thought she was part of this. They thought she was one of the people keeping Hope hidden, keeping Janelle away from her own daughter, which meant other people knew about this room. Other people were involved in erasing a mother and hiding her child. The baby woke up and started crying, the sound echoing off the bathroom tiles. Lorraine bounced her gently, mind racing. Hope needed formula, needed diapers, needed medical attention. But she also needed something more basic. She needed someone to acknowledge that she existed, that she mattered, that her mother's love had meant something. Lorraine made her decision. She gathered everything from the hidden room, the journal, the phone, the photographs, the bank records. Hope's diaper bag was already packed like someone expected them to leave quickly. The medical equipment looked expensive and complicated, but a label on the heart monitor showed it was rented from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Hope had been receiving medical care. There'd be records. But first, Lorraine needed to get them both out of this house. She wrapped Hope in her jacket and carried her down the curved staircase, past the oil paintings of Bradley's ancestors, past the crystal chandelier that cost more than her car. The baby seemed to sense the tension, staying quiet as they moved through the mansion's cold perfection. At the front door, Lorraine hesitated. Walking out with Hope meant crossing a line she couldn't uncross. It meant going against one of Atlanta's most powerful men, someone who could make her disappear just like he'd made Janelle disappear. But staying meant being part of the lie. It meant letting Hope grow up hidden, letting Janelle's story stay buried. The decision was easier than she'd expected. Lorraine buckled Hope into the back seat of her Honda Civic and drove toward downtown Atlanta. The baby slept peacefully, finally free from the sterile silence of her prison. But freedom brought new problems. Lorraine couldn't take Hope home. Not yet. Her apartment was the first place Bradley's people would look. She needed somewhere safe, somewhere she could figure out what to do next. She pulled into the parking lot of Grady Hospital and called the one person who'd always had her back. "Mama, I need help." Her mother's voice was sharp with worry. "Lorraine, where are you?" "Keisha's been asking. I can't explain everything over the phone, but I need you to take Keisha to Aunt Ruby's for a few days. Tell her it's a surprise visit." "What's going on?" Lorraine looked at Hope in the rearview mirror, this beautiful child who'd been treated like a shameful secret. "I found something I wasn't supposed to find. Someone who needed help." "Baby, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too, but I can't walk away from this. Not when a child's involved." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Then, what do you need me to do?" That's what Lorraine loved about her mama. Questions later, support now. "Keep Keisha safe. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And if anyone comes asking about me, you don't know anything." "Anyone like who?" Lorraine thought about Bradley Whitmore's political connections, his wealth, his ability to make problems disappear. Anyone with more power than sense. After hanging up, Lorraine sat in the hospital parking lot and opened Janelle's journal again. Near the back, she found a page that made her heart race. "I've been thinking about what Bradley said the night Hope was born. He didn't just want to hide our relationship. He wanted to hide Hope completely. He said mixed children were complicated for his political future. Like my daughter's existence was an inconvenience to be managed. But I've been watching the news about his foundation work, his donations to children's hospitals. He poses for pictures with sick kids, talks about helping families in need. How can someone who claims to love children treat his own daughter like a problem to be solved?" The hypocrisy was staggering. Bradley Whitmore built his reputation on helping vulnerable children while keeping his own child locked away like a dirty secret. Lorraine's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Hello. You have something that belongs to me." The voice was calm, cultured, terrifyingly polite. "Bradley Whitmore." "I have someone who belongs to herself," Lorraine said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Miss Tucker, I presume. I know who you are, where you live, where your daughter goes to school. You don't want to make this complicated." The threat was delivered like a business proposal, matter of fact and chilling. "It's already complicated," Lorraine replied. "Has been for 18 years. Silence stretched between them. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Lorraine looked to Hope, sleeping peacefully in the back seat, and knew exactly what she wanted. Justice for Janelle Washington, and freedom for her daughter. Ms. Washington is no longer a concern. The way he said it made Lorraine's blood freeze. No longer a concern. Past tense. Final. Where is she? That's not your business. Bring Hope home, and we can discuss reasonable compensation for your discretion. Home. Like that sterile hidden room was home. Like isolation and secrecy were love. Her home is with her mother. Her mother made choices that put Hope at risk. I've been protecting my daughter. By hiding her like she's something to be ashamed of. Bradley's voice hardened. You don't understand the complexities of this situation. I understand that you took a child from her mother. I understand that Janelle Washington hasn't been seen in 3 weeks. And I understand that you think money and power mean you don't have to face consequences. Miss Tucker, You're making a mistake that will affect more lives than just your own. The line went dead. Lorraine's hands shook as she looked at Hope, this innocent baby who'd become the center of a war between truth and power. She thought about Bradley's threat, about Keisha, about the life she'd built that could be destroyed with a phone call. But then she thought about Janelle Washington, a young mother who'd loved her daughter enough to document everything, to leave evidence behind in case someone tried to erase her story. Someone had tried, but they hadn't counted on a weekend Maid who understood what it meant to be invisible, who knew what it felt like to have people look through you like you didn't matter. Lorraine started the car and drove toward the one place in Atlanta where truth still mattered more than money, the police station. But first, she made one more call. Channel 2 News, this is Marcus. I have a story for you, Lorraine said, about a missing mother, a hidden child, and a billionaire who thinks he can buy silence. Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and doing what's right? Have you ever held evidence that could change everything, but knew using it might cost you everything too? Tell me in the comments what you would have done, because Lorraine Tucker was about to discover that speaking truth to power comes with a price that nobody warns you about. Detective Maria Santos had seen enough domestic cases to know when someone was telling the truth. Lorraine Tucker, sitting across from her desk at the Atlanta Police Department with a baby in her arms and a story that sounded like fiction, was telling the truth. The problem was that truth involving Bradley Whitmore was dangerous territory. Let me make sure I understand this, Santos said, reviewing her notes. You were cleaning Mr. Whitmore's house and found a hidden room containing this infant, along with evidence suggesting the child's mother has been missing for 3 weeks. Her name is Janelle Washington, Lorraine said firmly. And this is her daughter, Hope. Santos looked at the baby, who was awake now and staring around the police station with curious eyes. Mixed race, maybe 6 months old, clearly well cared for despite the bizarre circumstances. The journal entries, the phone records, the photographs, we'll need to verify all of this, Santos continued. But I have to tell you, Miss Tucker, that taking a child from someone's home, even under these circumstances, puts you in a legally complicated position. More legally complicated than hiding a baby behind a bathroom wall. Santos almost smiled. Lorraine Tucker had backbone. Point taken. But Bradley Whitmore isn't just anybody. He's got connections throughout the city, the state. If we're going to pursue this, we need to be absolutely certain of our facts. The station's front door opened, and Marcus Chun from Channel 2 News walked in with his camera operator. Santos had called him herself after hearing Lorraine's story. Some cases needed public pressure to move forward, especially when they involved people with enough power to make investigations disappear. Detective Santos, I'm Marcus Chun. We spoke about the story involving the Whitmore case, Santos finished. Miss Tucker, this is your choice. Once we involve the media, there's no going back. Your life changes permanently. Lorraine looked down at Hope, who grabbed her finger with surprising strength. My life already changed the moment I heard her crying. 20 minutes later, cameras were rolling. This is Marcus Chun reporting from Atlanta Police Headquarters, where a weekend cleaning job has uncovered what may be one of the city's most shocking stories of wealth, power, and hidden secrets. Lorraine held Hope in her lap, the baby's presence making her story more powerful than any words could. She spoke clearly, directly into the camera, about finding the hidden room, reading Janelle's journal, and discovering evidence of a systematic effort to erase a mother and hide her child. Janelle Washington loved her daughter, Lorraine said. She documented everything because she was afraid something might happen to her. She was right to be afraid. Marcus held up copies of the journal pages, the bank records, the photographs. What we're seeing here appears to be an 18-year pattern of manipulation and control. A vulnerable young woman, displaced by Hurricane Katrina, who became involved with one of Atlanta's most prominent philanthropists. The story aired at 11 p.m. By midnight, Lorraine's phone was ringing constantly. Reporters, lawyers, people claiming to know Janelle Washington, people offering money for exclusive interviews. But the call that mattered came at 2 a.m. Lorraine. The voice was elderly, shaky. I saw the news. About the baby, about Janelle. Who is this? My name is Dorothy Washington. Janelle is my granddaughter. I've been looking for her for 3 weeks. Lorraine's heart stopped. Where are you? New Orleans. I raised Janelle after her parents died. She used to call me every Sunday, no matter what. 3 weeks ago, the calls stopped. Dorothy's voice broke. I called the police in Atlanta, but they said there was no missing person report. They said maybe she just moved on. You know how young people are. But Janelle wouldn't disappear without telling me. Not unless something happened to her. Lorraine arranged to meet Dorothy at the airport the next morning. But first, she had to deal with Bradley Whitmore's response to the news story. Her phone rang at 3 a.m. Same polite, terrifying voice. Miss Tucker, you've made a significant error in judgment. I told the truth. Your version of the truth. But truth is subjective, isn't it? For instance, the truth is that you broke into my home and kidnapped my daughter. Hope isn't your daughter. You abandoned her. I protected her from a mother who was unstable, who made threats, who put her own child at risk with her erratic behavior. Lorraine felt sick. He was already building his defense, already twisting Janelle's story into something ugly. Where is Janelle Washington, Mr. Whitmore? I genuinely don't know. She left Atlanta 3 weeks ago after our last conversation became heated. I haven't heard from her since. The way he said it sounded almost believable. Almost. What about the hidden room? The medical equipment? The fact that Hope was living behind a wall, like a prisoner? Hope has serious health issues that require specialized care and privacy. The room was designed for her safety and medical needs, not as a prison. He had an answer for everything. 18 years to perfect his story, to make Janelle look unstable and himself look like a protective father making difficult choices. The journal of a troubled young woman who struggled with depression and made concerning statements about harming herself and others. I have medical records, Miss Tucker, psychiatric evaluations, evidence that Ms. Washington was not fit to care for Hope. Lorraine's confidence wavered. What if she was wrong? What if Janelle really had been unstable? What if Bradley had been protecting Hope from a dangerous situation? But then Hope made a soft cooing sound in her arms, and Lorraine remembered the love in every page of Janelle's journal. The careful documentation, the desperate attempts to stay connected to her daughter. If Janelle was so dangerous, why didn't you go through proper legal channels? Why hide Hope? Why not get custody through the courts? Silence. Because you knew any investigation would reveal the truth about how you treated Janelle Washington, how you isolated her, controlled her, made her dependent on you, and then discarded her when she became inconvenient. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Tucker. No, Mr. Whitmore. You've been playing a dangerous game for 18 years. I'm just calling you on it. The line went dead. At dawn, Lorraine sat in the hospital cafeteria, feeding Hope, while Detective Santos reviewed the case files. "We got problems," Santos said. "Whitmore's lawyers filed an emergency court order claiming you kidnapped Hope. They've provided medical records showing Janelle Washington was treated for postpartum depression and made concerning statements about harming herself." He's lying? Maybe, but he's got documentation, professional evaluations, a paper trail that makes him look like a concerned father protecting his child from an unstable mother. Lorraine felt the walls closing in. Bradley Whitmore had money, power, and 18 years to build his version of the truth. But she had something he didn't expect. "Detective, what if I told you Janelle Washington isn't the only woman who's disappeared after getting involved with Bradley Whitmore?" Santos looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I've been getting calls all night from people who saw the news. 3 different women from 3 different cities, all with similar stories. All missing. That's not possible. Someone would have noticed a pattern. Not if the women were already invisible. Poor, minority, displaced by disasters or circumstances. The kind of people society doesn't look for when they disappear." Santos was quiet for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" Lorraine looked down at Hope, this beautiful child who represented so much more than one man's secrets. "I'm suggesting Bradley Whitmore has been hunting vulnerable women for decades. And Janelle Washington wasn't his first victim. Have you ever realized that the person everyone thinks is a hero might actually be the villain? Have you ever discovered that a pattern of abuse was hiding behind charitable donations and public praise? Drop a comment and tell me. When powerful people create victims, who's responsible for speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves? Because Lorraine Tucker was about to discover that Hope's story was just the beginning. Dorothy Washington stepped off the plane at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport looking exactly like Lorraine had imagined. A woman in her 70s with silver hair, pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a church dress and carrying a purse that had seen better decades. But her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd survived enough to recognize danger when she saw it. The moment Dorothy saw Hope in Lorraine's arms, she started crying. "Oh, sweet Jesus," she whispered, reaching out with trembling hands. She looks just like Janelle did as a baby. Just like her. Hope seemed to recognize something in Dorothy's voice, reaching out with tiny fingers to touch the old woman's face. The connection was immediate, undeniable. This was family. "Tell me about Janelle," Lorraine said as they sat in the airport coffee shop. "What was she really like?" Dorothy's expression hardened. "Nothing like what that man's been telling people." Janelle was strong, determined. She worked 3 jobs while going to community college before Katrina hit. She wanted to be a teacher, help kids who came from nothing like she did. She pulled out her phone and showed Lorraine pictures. Janelle laughing at a family barbecue. Janelle in her graduation cap from culinary school. Janelle volunteering at a local food bank. Does this look like someone who was unstable? Someone who would hurt her own child? The woman in the photos looked nothing like the troubled person Bradley Whitmore had described. She looked confident, happy, full of life. After Katrina, she was lost for a while. Dorothy continued. "We all were. She ended up in that shelter in the 9th Ward, and that's when she met him. At first, she was so happy. Called me every day talking about this wonderful man who was helping rebuild the community. When did things change? When she got pregnant. Suddenly, their relationship had to be a secret. She couldn't be seen with him in public. He moved her to Atlanta, but she wasn't allowed to have visitors. She couldn't even give me her address." Dorothy's voice grew bitter. He isolated her from everyone who loved her, made her dependent on him for everything. When Hope was born, Janelle barely got to hold her before they took the baby away for specialized medical care. "Did you know Hope was sick?" Janelle mentioned heart problems, but nothing that couldn't be treated. That man made it sound like Hope was dying, like Janelle wasn't capable of caring for her own child. As Dorothy spoke, Lorraine's phone buzzed with messages from Detective Santos. 3 more women had come forward after seeing the news story, all with eerily similar experiences with Bradley Whitmore. "We need to get back to the police station," Lorraine said. "There are other women who want to tell their stories." The Atlanta Police Department had never seen anything like it. By afternoon, 7 women had arrived from different cities across the Southeast, all claiming to have had relationships with Bradley Whitmore that followed the same disturbing pattern. Detective Santos set up interviews in the conference room while Lorraine and Dorothy watched through one-way glass, Hope sleeping peacefully in Dorothy's arms. "He finds women who are vulnerable," explained Carmen Rodriguez, a 35-year-old from Miami who'd met Bradley during hurricane relief efforts in 2017. "Women who've lost everything, who have nowhere else to turn. He presents himself as a savior, someone who wants to help. But the help comes with conditions," added Shanice Williams from Birmingham. "You can't tell anyone about the relationship. You can't have friends or family visit. You become completely dependent on him for housing, money, everything." The pattern was chilling in its consistency. Bradley would identify women who were isolated, vulnerable, often displaced by natural disasters or economic hardship. He'd provide financial support and housing, but gradually increase his control over every aspect of their lives. "If you got pregnant," said Teresa Martinez from Jacksonville, "that's when things got really bad. He'd convince you that you weren't capable of being a mother, that the child would be better off without you." "What happened to your children?" Detective Santos asked. The silence in the room was deafening. "He has lawyers, social workers, doctors, a whole system set up to make women like us disappear," Carmen said finally. "They create documentation showing we're unfit mothers. Drug problems, mental health issues, criminal records. All fake, but convincing enough to take our kids away." How many children are we talking about? Santos asked. At least 15 that I know of, Shanice replied. Maybe more. He keeps them hidden, tells people they're adopted or from previous relationships. Some of the mothers, they don't survive the separation. Lorraine felt sick. What do you mean they don't survive? Some commit suicide, can't live with losing their children. Others just disappear. Like Janelle. Through the glass, Dorothy held Hope tighter, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just about one missing woman anymore. This was about a systematic pattern of abuse spanning decades. Detective Santos looked overwhelmed. Why hasn't anyone reported this before? Why haven't these patterns been connected? Because we're nobody, Teresa said quietly. Poor women, minority women, women without families or connections. When we disappear, who looks for us? Who cares? Bradley Whitmore is a philanthropist, Carmen added bitterly. He donates millions to children's charities, gets awards for helping vulnerable communities. Who's going to believe that the man saving orphans is actually creating them? The scope of Bradley's crimes was staggering. But what made Lorraine's blood run cold was the realization that Hope wasn't his only hidden child. She might be one of many, scattered across multiple states, kept away from their mothers through a web of legal manipulation and financial control. We need to find the other children, Lorraine said to Detective Santos. If there are 15 mothers, there could be 15 kids being kept from their families. Santos nodded grimly. This is going to require federal involvement. FBI, possibly. This crosses state lines, involves potential human trafficking charges. But even as they talked about investigations and federal agencies, Lorraine knew the most important question remained unanswered. Where was Janelle Washington? As if reading her thoughts, Dorothy spoke up from behind the glass, her voice carrying through the intercom. My granddaughter is dead, isn't she? The conference room fell silent. All the women who'd share their stories about Bradley Whitmore understood what Dorothy was really asking. They'd all wondered about the women who came before them, the ones who'd simply vanished without a trace. Mrs. Washington, Detective Santos said gently, we don't know that for certain. I do. Dorothy's voice was steady now, filled with the terrible certainty that comes from accepting the worst. Janelle wouldn't have stayed away from Hope willingly. Nothing would have kept her from fighting for her daughter. The only thing that could stop her. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Lorraine looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her great-grandmother's arms, oblivious to the fact that her mother had likely died trying to save her. The weight of responsibility settled on Lorraine's shoulders like a stone. This little girl would grow up without ever knowing how much her mother had loved her, how hard Janelle had fought to stay connected to her daughter, how she documented everything in that journal because she knew someone might try to erase her story. But Bradley Whitmore had underestimated one thing. He'd assumed that if Janelle disappeared, her story would disappear with her. He'd counted on silence, on the invisibility of women's society had already forgotten. He hadn't counted on a weekend Maid who understood what it meant to be overlooked, who knew that sometimes the people with the least power are the ones brave enough to speak the loudest. Detective Santos, Lorraine said, making a decision that would change everything. I want to help you build a case that puts Bradley Whitmore away forever. Not just for what he did to Janelle, but for what he's done to all these women. That's dangerous, Miss Tucker. He's already threatening you. If you push harder, he's already destroyed my life, Lorraine interrupted. I can't go back to cleaning his house, pretending I don't know what he is. And I can't let Hope grow up believing her mother abandoned her. She looked around the room at all the women who'd found the courage to tell their stories. Women who'd risked everything to expose a man who'd thought himself untouchable. Besides, she added, I'm not doing this alone anymore. Have you ever realized that the most dangerous predators are the ones who hide behind charitable work and public praise? Have you ever wondered how many victims stay silent because they know no one will believe them against someone with wealth and power? Tell me in the comments, what would it take for you to speak up against someone who could destroy your life? Because Lorraine Tucker was about to discover that bringing down Bradley Whitmore would require more than just courage. It would require strategy, allies, and the willingness to risk everything for justice. And somewhere in Atlanta, Bradley Whitmore was making plans to ensure that neither Lorraine nor Hope would ever threaten his carefully constructed life again. Bradley Whitmore sat in his downtown office, 50 floors above Atlanta, watching the news coverage of his scandal with the detached interest of a man who'd survived worse storms. His team of lawyers, publicists, and fixers filled the conference room, each holding thick folders of damage control strategies. But Lorraine Tucker had no idea what she'd really walked into. The narrative is simple, Bradley told his crisis management team. Troubled young woman with a history of mental illness abandons her sick child. Wealthy philanthropist steps in to provide medical care and protection. Disgruntled employee breaks in a private home and kidnaps vulnerable infant. His head of security, a former FBI agent named Collins, slid a tablet across the table. Lorraine Tucker's financial records, employment history, personal life. Single mother, lives paycheck to paycheck, recently behind on rent. Easy to paint as someone motivated by money. Bradley scrolled through the information with practiced efficiency. What about the other women who came forward? Already handled. Carmen Rodriguez has an outstanding warrant for drug possession, something she doesn't know about yet. Shanice Williams just lost her job due to budget cuts. Teresa Martinez is facing eviction. The system was elegant in its cruelty. Create pressure points, then exploit them. Make the victims' lives so unstable that they couldn't maintain their accusations. And Detective Santos? She's been reassigned to a cold case review. The Whitmore investigation has been transferred to someone more understanding of complex situations. Bradley nodded. Detective Mike Harrison had been his pocket for 3 years, ever since Bradley's foundation donated $2 million to the Police Benevolent Fund and helped Harrison's gambling debts disappear. What about the grandmother? Collins consulted his notes. Dorothy Washington, 73, lives on Social Security. Flight to Atlanta maxed out her credit card. She's got no resources for a long fight. Good. And the baby? Children's Services has been contacted. They're concerned about Hope's medical needs being addressed by someone without proper training or legal guardianship. Bradley almost smiled. The same system he'd used to separate 15 other children from their mothers was already moving into place. By tomorrow, Hope would be back in his custody, and Dorothy Washington would be on a plane to New Orleans with a non-disclosure agreement and enough money to keep quiet. But there was something different about Lorraine Tucker that bothered him. The other women had been easy to manage, isolated, dependent, already broken by circumstances before he found them. Lorraine had family, community connections, and something more dangerous, righteous anger. I want her discredited completely, Bradley said. Find everything. Parking tickets, late tax payments, anything that makes her look unreliable. Already in progress. But sir, there's something else. Collins looked uncomfortable. Channel 2 isn't dropping the story. Marcus Chun is digging deeper, making connections between the women who came forward in previous missing person cases. This was exactly what Bradley had feared. One persistent reporter could undo decades of careful planning. Handle it. Sir, Marcus Chun works for a media company that receives advertising revenue from my tech investments. I'm sure his editors will understand that some stories aren't in the public interest. The meeting continued for another hour, each detail of Lorraine's destruction planned with corporate precision. Her life would be systematically dismantled. Her job, her reputation, her ability to care for her own daughter. By the time Bradley was finished, no one would believe anything she said about him. But as his team filed out, Bradley stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine concern. Because Lorraine Tucker had done something none of the other women had managed. She'd made Janelle Washington visible again. For 18 years, Bradley had successfully erased women who threatened his carefully constructed image. Poor women, minority women, women whose disappearances barely registered with authorities. He'd perfected the art of making people vanish without anyone asking questions. But Janelle's journal, her documentation, her desperate attempts to stay connected to Hope, it had all survived. Her story was out there now, being told by someone who couldn't be easily dismissed. Bradley pulled out a secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. "It's me. We have a problem in Atlanta." The voice on the other end was gravelly, professional. "The cleaning lady? She's not backing down. Neither is the reporter. What do you need?" Bradley looked out at the city lights, thinking about all the women who'd stood in his way over the years. All the problems that had been quietly resolved. Make it stop. Permanently. Both of them. Bradley thought about Hope, about the empire he'd built on silence and fear, about everything he stood to lose if the truth came out completely. All of them. The maid, the reporter, the grandmother. Anyone who can connect me to Janelle Washington. That's a lot of heat for one story. The story dies with them. Clean slate. There was a pause. It'll cost extra. 3 problems require 3 solutions. Money isn't an issue. Timing is. I need this finished before they can do more damage. After hanging up, Bradley returned to his desk and opened the file on Hope Washington. Beautiful child, healthy despite her early heart problems. She'd grow up believing her father was a hero who saved her from an unstable mother. She'd never know that her mother had died trying to protect her, just like the other 14 children scattered across his network of hidden identities and shell corporations. Each one told the same story about their troubled mothers who'd abandoned them, each one grateful to their savior father who'd given them better lives. The system was perfect. It had worked for 2 decades. But Lorraine Tucker threatened to expose everything, and Bradley Whitmore hadn't become one of Atlanta's most powerful men by allowing threats to survive. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the parking garage, a man with cold eyes checked his weapon and studied photographs of 3 targets. A cleaning lady who'd found something she shouldn't have, a reporter who wouldn't stop digging, and an old woman who'd traveled too far to find her missing granddaughter. By tomorrow night, Bradley's problem would be solved permanently. Have you ever wondered how predators stay hidden in plain sight? How they use their wealth and influence to silence victims before they can speak? Share in the comments if you've ever seen someone use their power to hurt vulnerable people, because sometimes the most dangerous criminals are the ones everyone thinks are heroes. Lorraine knew someone was following her. She'd noticed the black SUV 3 times since leaving the police station. Once in the parking lot, once at the grocery store where she'd stopped to buy formula for Hope, and now idling across the street from the hotel where she, Dorothy, and Hope were staying. Detective Harrison, who'd taken over the case from Santos, had been useless. He'd spent their meeting explaining why the evidence against Bradley Whitmore was insufficient and why Hope needed to be returned to her father immediately. Mr. Whitmore has provided extensive documentation of his relationship with Ms. Washington, Harrison had said, not meeting Lorraine's eyes. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, legal agreements giving him custody rights. Those documents are fake, Lorraine had replied. The women who came forward have credibility issues. Drug charges, employment problems, financial instability. It was like watching a script being read. Every response designed to discredit, dismiss, and discourage. Now, sitting in their hotel room while Dorothy rocked Hope to sleep, Lorraine understood that the police wouldn't help them. Bradley Whitmore owned too many people, had too much influence. But she wasn't giving up. Marcus Chun from Channel 2 had called an hour ago with disturbing news. His editor had killed the Bradley Whitmore story, citing legal concerns and insufficient verification. Marcus was furious but powerless. The decision had come from corporate headquarters, not the local station. Someone got to them, Marcus had told her. Big money, big pressure. But I'm not dropping this. I'm working on the story independently. Is that safe? Lorraine had asked. Probably not, but some stories are worth the risk. Now Marcus was meeting them at midnight in the hotel parking lot to review new evidence he'd uncovered about Bradley's past. Evidence that connected him to missing women cases going back 25 years. At 11:45 p.m., Lorraine kissed sleeping Hope goodbye and left her with Dorothy. The hotel hallway was empty, fluorescent lights humming overhead like insects. The elevator descended too slowly, each floor marked by a soft ding that seemed loud in the silence. The parking lot was dark except for a few security lights. Marcus's car was parked near the back, engine running. Lorraine walked quickly across the asphalt, keys clutched in her hand like a weapon. Marcus! No answer. The driver's side window was down, but she couldn't see inside clearly. Marcus, it's Lorraine. She got close enough to see blood on the steering wheel. Marcus Chan was slumped over, his laptop bag beside him torn open, contents scattered across the passenger seat. But he was breathing. Oh my God, Marcus! Lorraine yanked open the car door and checked his pulse. Strong but fast. There was a lump on the back of his head, but the bleeding had stopped. Lorraine! His voice was weak, confused. What happened? Someone hit me. Took my files, everything about Bradley. Lorraine looked around the parking lot. Empty cars, deep shadows. The perfect place for an ambush. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospitals. They'll be watching. Marcus struggled to sit up. Bradley knows we met. He knows everything. Fear crept up Lorraine's spine. If they'd attacked Marcus, if they'd stolen his research, how much did Bradley know about her movements? Where are the other copies of your files? Safe place. But Lorraine, there's something else. I found out what happened to Janelle Washington. Her blood went cold. What do you mean? Marcus fumbled in his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Death certificate. Jane Doe, found in the Chattahoochee River 3 weeks ago. Dental records match. The paper shook in Lorraine's hands. Janelle Washington, age 40, cause of death, drowning. Body discovered by fishermen 20 miles downstream from Atlanta. She was murdered, Lorraine whispered. Can't prove it. But the timing. She disappeared the same night she texted about going to see Hope. Next thing, she's pulled out of the river. Lorraine thought about Hope sleeping upstairs, a baby who would never see her mother again because a powerful man had decided Janelle Washington was inconvenient. We have to go to the FBI, she said. This is murder now. With what evidence? They took everything. My laptop, my files, my backup drives. A car door slammed somewhere in the parking lot. Both of them froze. Get out of here, Marcus whispered. Take Hope and run. Don't trust anyone in law enforcement. Bradley owns too many people. I'm not leaving you. You have to. That baby is the only evidence left that can bring him down. Without Hope, all those women's stories disappear. Footsteps echoed across the asphalt, getting closer. Go. Now. Lorraine ran. She took the stairs instead of the elevator, heart pounding as she climbed 4 flights. The hotel hallway was still empty, but everything felt different now. Dangerous watched. She slid the key card and burst into their room. Dorothy, we have to go. Right now. Dorothy was standing by the window, holding Hope against her chest. They're here, she said quietly. Lorraine looked through the curtain. 3 black SUVs had surrounded the hotel entrance. Men in dark suits were talking to someone at the front desk. Fire stairs, Lorraine said. Back exit. They grabbed the diaper bag and what little they brought. Dorothy moved surprisingly fast for her age, understanding that their lives depended on getting out before Bradley's people reached the 4th floor. The back stairwell was concrete and cold, their footsteps echoing despite their attempts at silence. Hope started fussing, and Dorothy whispered soothing words while they descended. At the ground floor, Lorraine cracked open the exit door. The back parking lot was empty except for her Honda Civic. They made it halfway to the car before the door behind them exploded open. Stop right there. The man's voice was calm, professional. He wore an expensive suit and held a gun like someone comfortable with violence. Dorothy clutched Hope tighter. Please don't hurt the baby. Nobody gets hurt if you cooperate. Mr. Whitmore just wants his daughter back. She's not his daughter, Lorraine said. She's Janelle Washington's daughter. The man's expression didn't change. Ms. Washington is no longer a concern. The way he said it confirmed what Lorraine had feared. Janelle hadn't just died. She'd been killed. You murdered her. I solve problems. Ms. Washington was a problem, just like you're becoming a problem. Lorraine looked at Dorothy, at Hope, at this beautiful baby who'd been born into a nightmare, created by a man who thought wealth and power meant he could do anything to anyone. What do you want? You disappear. The grandmother goes back to New Orleans and forgets she ever had a granddaughter. The reporter stops digging into things that don't concern him. And if we don't? The man's smile was cold as winter. Then you joined Janelle Washington in the river. Have you ever faced someone who thought your life was worth less than their secrets? Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves? Tell me in the comments what you would have done, because Lorraine Tucker was about to make a choice that would determine whether Hope Washington would grow up free or remain a prisoner of her father's lies. Dorothy Washington had survived Hurricane Betsy in 1965, 3 decades of teaching in underfunded New Orleans schools, and raising her granddaughter after her son died in Iraq. She'd buried a husband, a child, and more friends than anyone should have to count. But she'd be damned if she was going to let some rich white man's hired killer take her great-granddaughter. "You want this baby?" Dorothy asked, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her chest. "You're going to have to kill an old woman in front of her." The gunman looked annoyed. "Ma'am, don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" Dorothy's voice rose. "You murder my granddaughter, and you want to talk about hard? Boy, you don't know what hard is." Lorraine watched in amazement as this 73-year-old woman stared down an armed killer like he was a misbehaving student. Dorothy had shifted Hope to her left arm, keeping the baby protected while facing the threat head-on. "Janelle was 22 when your boss destroyed her life," Dorothy continued. "Took advantage of a girl who lost everything in Katrina. Got her pregnant, and then threw her away like trash when it became inconvenient. Lady, I don't care about ancient history." "Ancient history?" Dorothy's eyes flashed with anger that made the gunman take a step back. "That girl called me every Sunday for 18 years. Every Sunday, no matter what. You know what the last thing she said to me was?" The gunman didn't answer. "Grandmama, I'm going to get Hope back. Whatever it takes, I'm going to be the mother she deserves. That was 3 weeks ago, and now you're telling me she's dead." Tears streamed down Dorothy's face, but her voice never wavered. "My granddaughter died fighting for this baby. You think I'm going to hand Hope over to the man who killed her mother?" "Mrs. Washington," Lorraine said quietly, "maybe we should—" "No." Dorothy's voice cut through the night air like a blade. "I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of powerful people thinking they can hurt my family and get away with it." She stepped closer to the gunman, Hope held protectively against her chest. "You want to shoot me? Go ahead. But understand something. I raised that girl's mother. I know what real strength looks like. And this baby has her mama's blood in her veins." The gunman raised his weapon, but something in Dorothy's eyes made him hesitate. "You kill me, you still have a problem," Dorothy continued. "Because Lorraine here isn't going to stop fighting. Because that reporter isn't going to stop digging. Because the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how much money you throw at it." "Shut up, old woman. I've been an old woman for 20 years, son. You think that scares me?" Dorothy reached into her purse with her free hand. The gunman tensed, finger on the trigger. She pulled out a cell phone. "This is connected to Facebook Live," she said calmly. "Been recording for the last 5 minutes. Right now, 300 people in New Orleans are watching you threaten to kill an old woman and a baby." The gunman's face went pale. "Turn it off. Can't do that. See, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I knew Bradley Whitmore would try to silence us, so I made sure the whole world would be watching when he did." Lorraine looked at the phone screen. Dorothy wasn't lying. Comments were flooding in from people watching the live stream, people recording the video on their own devices, people sharing it across social media. "My church has 5,000 members," Dorothy said conversationally. "My former students teach all over the South. My neighbor's son works for CNN. You think this video disappears just because you kill me?" The gunman was sweating now, gun still raised but his confidence shaken. "In about 2 minutes, this video is going to be on every news channel in the country," Dorothy continued. "Bradley Whitmore's man threatens grandmother and baby. How's that going to look for his charitable foundation?" Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "Someone called the police," Dorothy said. "Probably about 50 someone's, actually." The gunman lowered his weapon, speaking rapidly into a Bluetooth earpiece. "We have a problem. Social media complications. Need extraction now." He looked back at Dorothy with something that might have been respect. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Dorothy replied, "because now the whole world is watching. And when the whole world is watching, Even powerful men have to follow the rules. The gunman disappeared into the shadows just as police cars flooded the hotel parking lot. Detective Santos was the first officer out, gun drawn, scanning for threats. "Are you all right?" Santos asked, rushing to their side. "We are now," Dorothy said, finally allowing her voice to shake. "But we need protection. All of us." Santos nodded grimly. "I've been removed from the case, but I'm working with Faye." "Why?" "Because it's not just about Bradley Whitmore anymore. We've identified connections to missing women cases in 8 states. This is human trafficking, organized crime level." Lorraine felt relief wash over her. "So Hope is safe?" "She will be. But we're going to need your testimony, all of your testimony, to bring down the entire network." Dorothy looked down at Hope, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos around her. "What about her future? Where does she go when this is all over?" Santos smiled. "That's up to you, Mrs. Washington. You're her legal next of kin." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "My great-grandbaby's coming home to New Orleans." As they were escorted to safety by federal agents, Lorraine felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not just for Hope Washington, but for all the women who'd been silenced, all the children who'd been hidden, all the families torn apart by one man's greed and cruelty. The truth was finally coming out. But Bradley Whitmore wasn't finished fighting. Had you ever seen someone refuse to back down when everything was against them? Have you ever witnessed an ordinary person stand up to extraordinary power? Share in the comments about a time when you saw real courage in action, because Dorothy Washington just proved that the strongest people aren't always the ones with the most money or the biggest weapons. They're the ones with the most love. FBI agent Sarah Chun had spent 15 years tracking human traffickers, but the Bradley Whitmore case was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Most trafficking operations were crude, violent, obvious. Whitmore had built something sophisticated, a network that identified vulnerable women, isolated them systematically, and then erased them so completely that their disappearances barely registered with authorities. 17 confirmed victims across 8 states. Agent Chun told the task force assembled in Atlanta's federal building. 15 children recovered from various locations, all living under false identities with fabricated backstories about troubled mothers who abandoned them. The evidence room looked like something from a horror movie. Bank records showing payments to corrupt social workers, medical professionals who'd falsified psychiatric evaluations, lawyers who'd created fake custody documents. An entire system designed to steal children and erase mothers. "How did he get away with this for so long?" asked Agent Martinez from the Miami office. "By targeting women no one would look for," Chin replied. "Hurricane victims, homeless women, immigrants without documentation. Women whose disappearances wouldn't trigger major investigations." Lorraine sat in the witness room, reviewing her testimony with federal prosecutors. Through the one-way glass, she could see Dorothy holding Hope, both of them under round-the-clock protection while the case developed. "The journal is our strongest piece of evidence," Prosecutor David Kim explained. "Janelle Washington documented everything: the systematic isolation, the financial control, the gradual separation from her daughter." "What about the other women who came forward?" 3 have agreed to testify, but Whitmore's people have been pressuring them. Carmen Rodriguez was arrested on those fake drug charges. Shanice Williams had her unemployment benefits cut off. Teresa Martinez is facing eviction. Lorraine felt angry heat rise in her chest. He's still trying to silence them. That's what makes your testimony crucial. You're the one person who can't be easily discredited. You found Hope, you have the physical evidence, and Dorothy Washington's Facebook Live video has been viewed 12 million times. The video had changed everything. Watching an elderly black woman stand down an armed man while protecting her great-granddaughter had struck a nerve across America. Hashtag Justice for Janelle was trending on social media, and Bradley Whitmore's carefully constructed public image was crumbling in real time. But the man himself remained defiant. "Mr. Whitmore's legal team is claiming this is an elaborate extortion scheme," Kim continued. "They're saying you and the other women coordinated your stories to frame him for money. That's insane. Rich men have gotten away with insane defenses before. We need to make sure this case is airtight. Through the window, Lorraine watched Dorothy sing softly to Hope, the same lullabies she'd probably sung to Janelle 20 years ago. The connection between them was undeniable. This was family, the family Bradley had tried to destroy. Agent Chun entered with new information that made everyone in the room go quiet. "We found Whitmore's real estate holdings," she said. "Properties in 12 states, all purchased through shell companies. Storage facilities, isolated warehouses, residential compounds. What were they used for?" Chen's expression was grim. "We're still investigating, but preliminary evidence suggests they were safe houses, places to keep women and children during transitions between their old lives and their new identities." Lorraine thought about Hope hidden behind that bathroom wall, and a terrible possibility occurred to her. How many other children are still hidden? "We don't know yet, but we've identified at least 6 properties that show signs of recent occupation." The scope of Bradley's crimes was staggering. This wasn't just about one man's desire to control women. It was an organized operation that had destroyed dozens of families over 2 decades. "There's something else," Chun continued. "Financial records show payments to officials in multiple states. Judges, social workers, police detectives. This corruption goes deep." Detective Harrison, who tried to shut down Lorraine's case, was already under internal investigation. 3 family court judges have been suspended pending review of their custody decisions. A network of complicit officials was being exposed. But the most shocking discovery came when agents raided Bradley's personal computers. "He kept records," Chun said, disbelief in her voice. "Detailed files on every woman he targeted, every child he took, every official he corrupted, like he was proud of it." The files painted a picture of a man who saw vulnerable women as prey, their children as possessions to be collected. Photos, medical records, psychological profiles, evidence of systematic stalking and manipulation going back 25 years. Janelle Washington wasn't his first victim. She wasn't even his 10th. But she might be his last because she'd left behind something none of the others had managed. Documentation of her own story, evidence that survived her murder. "When do we arrest him?" Lorraine asked. "Tomorrow morning. Federal marshals will execute warrants simultaneously at his home, his offices, and the remaining properties. We're not giving him a chance to destroy more evidence or harm more people." That night, Lorraine sat with Dorothy and Hope in their secure hotel room, watching the news coverage of the expanding investigation. Bradley Whitmore's foundation had suspended operations. His business partners were distancing themselves. His political allies were calling for full investigations. "Janelle would be proud," Dorothy said softly, rocking Hope to sleep. "Her baby girl is finally free." Lorraine thought about the woman she'd never met, but felt she knew intimately through her journal entries. Janelle Washington had been young, vulnerable, isolated, everything Bradley Whitmore looked for in a victim. But she'd also been smart, determined, and brave enough to document her story even when she knew it might cost her life. "She saved Hope," Lorraine said. Even after she was gone, she found a way to save her daughter. Tomorrow, Bradley Whitmore would be arrested for crimes that spanned decades and destroyed countless lives. His empire of silence and control was crumbling. But tonight, Hope Washington slept peacefully in her great-grandmother's arms, finally safe from the man who tried to erase her very existence. Have you ever seen justice finally catch up to someone who thought they were untouchable? Have you ever watched the truth come out despite powerful people trying to bury it? Tell me in the comments about a time when the underdog won. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't money or influence. It's one person brave enough to speak the truth. Bradley Whitmore was drinking his morning coffee and reading stock reports when federal agents kicked down his door. The raid was coordinated across 12 locations simultaneously. His Buckhead mansion, his downtown office, his foundation headquarters, and 9 properties in 6 states. FBI agents, federal marshals, and local police descended like an army, armed with warrants that covered everything from human trafficking to murder. Agent Chun found Bradley in his study, still in his silk pajamas, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and respectability. Awards for charitable giving lined the walls. Photos showed him with senators, governors, even a former president. Bradley James Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, kidnapping, fraud, and murder in the first degree. He didn't resist, didn't even look surprised. He simply set down his coffee cup and extended his wrist for the handcuffs. "I'd like to call my lawyer." You can call from downtown. The perp walk was broadcast live on every major network. Bradley Whitmore, Atlanta's beloved philanthropist, led away in handcuffs while federal agents carried boxes of evidence from his mansion. The footage would play on loop for weeks. But the real shock came when agents opened his private vault. Inside, they found what could only be described as trophies. Photos of women who disappeared over the past 25 years. Jewelry, personal items, locks of hair. Documentation of births, deaths, and disappearances organized like a macabre filing system. "Jesus Christ," Agent Martinez whispered, staring at the evidence. He kept souvenirs. The vault contained files on 37 women, not 17, as they'd initially estimated. 37 women across 2 decades, some who'd simply vanished, others who died under suspicious circumstances. Janelle Washington's driver's license was there, along with her high school graduation ring and a photo of her holding baby Hope. But the most disturbing discovery was a handwritten ledger detailing Bradley's acquisitions, women he'd identified, isolated, impregnated, and then eliminated when they became problematic. He kept score like a hunter tracking kills. The ledger revealed the true scope of his operation. Shell companies in 15 states, safe houses disguised as rehabilitation centers, a network of corrupt officials spanning decades. Children were moved between locations, given new identities, raised by handlers who told them their mothers had abandoned them. It was systematic, sophisticated, and absolutely evil. Agent Shun found herself staring at a map covered in red pins, each one marking a location where women had disappeared. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for: natural disasters, economic collapses, situations that created vulnerable populations. Bradley Whitmore had been hunting hurricane victims, refugee women, anyone society had already forgotten. "How many children are we talking about?" she asked the forensic accountant reviewing financial records. Based on birth certificates and medical records, at least 22, ranging in age from 6 months to 18 years. 22 children hidden across the country, believing their mothers had abandoned them. 22 families destroyed by one man's monstrous appetite for control. The rescue operations began immediately. In Phoenix, agents found 3 children living with a woman who claimed to be their adoptive mother, but had no legal documentation. In Miami, 2 teenage boys discovered that their entire life story was fabricated. In Dallas, a 12-year-old girl learned that her mother hadn't abandoned her. She'd been murdered for trying to stay in contact. Each reunion was heartbreaking. Children meeting biological family members they'd been told were dead or dangerous. Grandparents, aunts, siblings who'd been searching for years without knowing where to look. But the most emotional reunion happened in Atlanta. Lorraine was present when agents brought in Marcus Williams, a 17-year-old who'd been living with Bradley's associates in Savannah. He was told his mother was a drug addict who'd sold him for money. The truth was that his mother, Regina Williams, had been a college student displaced by Hurricane Katrina. She'd met Bradley during relief work and followed the same tragic pattern as all the others. Regina's sister had been looking for both of them for 15 years. "Marcus." The woman's voice broke as she saw her nephew for the first time since he was a toddler. "Oh my God, Marcus, you look just like your mama." The teenager stood frozen, processing the reality that everything he'd been told about his life was a lie. "Where is she? Where's my mother?" The silence in the room was crushing. Regina Williams had been found dead in a New Orleans canal 13 years ago, ruled a suicide despite evidence suggesting otherwise. "She loved you," his aunt said through tears. "She fought to keep you. She never stopped looking for you." Similar scenes played out across the country as Bradley's network crumbled. Families destroyed by his greed slowly began to heal. Children learned the truth about parents who died trying to save them. But for every reunion, there were reminders of lives that couldn't be restored. Janelle Washington would never hold her daughter again. Regina Williams would never see her son graduate from high school. 12 other women would never get the chance to explain to their children that they'd been stolen, not abandoned. Bradley Whitmore had left a trail of devastation spanning decades. But his victims had also left something behind: evidence, documentation, and people who loved them enough to never stop searching. The indictment was 93 pages long and included charges in 8 states: murder, kidnapping, human trafficking, conspiracy, fraud, corruption of public officials. If convicted on all counts, Bradley faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. His first court appearance drew protesters, reporters, and families of victims from across the country. Lorraine sat in the front row holding hope, with Dorothy beside her and other survivors filling the gallery. When Bradley entered in his orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles, he looked smaller somehow. The expensive suits and commanding presence were gone, replaced by the reality of what he was: a predator who'd been caught. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. His own records, his trophy collection, the testimony of survivors, and the families of victims. The trial would last months, but the outcome wasn't in doubt. Have you ever seen someone face the consequences of decades of evil actions? Have you ever watched justice finally come for someone who thought they were above the law? Share your thoughts in the comments about what true accountability looks like, because Bradley Whitmore was about to learn that wealth and power can't protect you when the whole world is watching. And in Atlanta, Hope Washington slept peacefully in her great-grandmother's arms, finally free from the monster who tried to steal her life before it even began. And in Atlanta, Hope Washington slept peacefully in her great-grandmother's arms, finally free from the monster who tried to steal her life before it even began. 6 months after Bradley Whitmore's arrest, Lorraine stood in the New Orleans courthouse where Hope Washington's adoption hearing was taking place. Dorothy sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing her best Sunday dress and holding the baby who'd become the center of her world. The courtroom was packed with people whose lives had been touched by the case: survivors, family members of victims, journalists, and advocates who'd made sure Bradley's crimes stayed in the public eye. "Your Honor," Dorothy's lawyer began, "this is a simple matter of family reunification. Hope Washington belongs with her blood family, the people who loved her mother and will honor her memory." But Bradley's legal team, even from prison, was still fighting. Mr. Whitmore provided for this child's medical care and financial needs, his attorney argued. He has legal documentation establishing paternity and custody rights. Judge Patricia Morris had reviewed every piece of evidence, every forged document, every fake psychiatric evaluation Bradley had used to steal children from their mothers. The court finds that all documentation provided by Mr. Whitmore was obtained through fraud, coercion, and systematic manipulation of vulnerable women, she ruled. Hope Washington's rightful place is with her great-grandmother, Dorothy Washington, who will provide her with love, stability, and connection to her mother's memory. The gavel came down like thunder. Dorothy broke down crying, holding Hope tight as their family and supporters erupted in celebration. After months of legal battles, bureaucratic fights, and media attention, Hope was finally, officially, home. But the healing was just beginning. Lorraine had spent the past 6 months working with federal investigators to locate and reunite Bradley's other victims. Each case was heartbreaking in its own way. Marcus Williams, the 17-year-old who discovered his entire life was built on lies, struggled with anger and depression. Learning that his mother had died trying to find him, that he'd been raised believing she'd abandoned him, had shattered his sense of identity. "Some days I hate her for leaving me," he confessed to Lorraine during one of their conversations. "Then I hate myself for hating her when I know it wasn't her choice." Counseling helped, slowly. So did connecting with his aunt, who filled in the gaps in his memory with stories about Regina Williams, a young woman who'd wanted to be a teacher, who'd loved books and music, who'd spent every penny she had trying to find her son. The younger children adapted more easily. 3-year-old Sofia Martinez didn't remember her mother clearly, but she blossomed when reunited with her grandmother in Jacksonville. 8-year-old twins David and Daniel Rodriguez had been told their mother was a drug addict. Learning she'd been a nursing student who died in a suspicious car accident was traumatic, but their extended family rallied around them. The teenage victims faced the hardest adjustments. They'd built their identities around the lies Bradley had told them, and discovering the truth meant questioning everything they thought they knew about themselves. Support groups formed naturally. Survivors helping survivors, families sharing resources and strategies for healing. The Bradley Whitmore case had exposed a network of evil, but it had also created a community of people committed to making sure nothing like it happened again. Lorraine found herself at the center of that community, helping coordinate services and advocating for policy changes that would make it harder for predators to exploit vulnerable women and children. "You've become famous," Marcus Chun told her during a follow-up interview 6 months after the story broke. His head injury from the attack had healed, but he walked with a slight limp now, a permanent reminder of how dangerous truth-telling could be. "I didn't want to be famous," Lorraine replied. "I just want to hope to be safe. But your courage ends." The ripple effects of the case were still spreading. Other survivors of trafficking and abuse had found their voices. Laws were changing to better protect vulnerable women. Charitable organizations were implementing new oversight procedures to prevent predators from using philanthropy as a cover. Bradley Whitmore's foundation had been dissolved, its assets distributed to legitimate organizations serving the communities he'd exploited. His personal wealth was being used to fund victim services and family reunification efforts. But the man himself remained defiant. From his federal prison cell, Bradley continued to maintain his innocence. His lawyers filed appeal after appeal, claiming he'd been framed by disgruntled employees and unstable women seeking money. The evidence against him was overwhelming, but his narcissism was stronger than facts. He genuinely believes he was helping those women, FBI agent Chun explained to Lorraine. In his mind, he was rescuing them from poverty and instability. Taking their children was protecting them from unfit mothers. How can someone be that delusional? 25 years of getting away with it. When you have enough money and power to make problems disappear, reality becomes whatever you want it to be. But reality had finally caught up with Bradley Whitmore. His trial was scheduled to begin in 3 months, and prosecutors were confident about securing convictions on multiple charges. The key witnesses would be the survivors, women like Carmen Rodriguez, who'd found the strength to testify despite ongoing intimidation efforts. Women like Shanice Williams, who'd lost her job and her apartment but refused to be silenced. And Lorraine Tucker, the weekend maid who'd heard a baby crying and decided that some things were more important than her own safety. "Are you nervous about testifying?" Dorothy asked as they walked through the French Quarter after Hope's adoption hearing. Terrified, Lorraine admitted, "But I keep thinking about Janelle's journal. How she documented everything because she knew someone might try to erase her story." Hope babbled happily in her stroller, pointing at street musicians and laughing at the colorful buildings. At 14 months old, she was walking, talking, and completely oblivious to the battle that had been fought for her freedom. She looked like her mother. Dorothy had shown Lorraine pictures of Janelle at the same age. The same bright eyes, the same curious expression, the same smile that could light up a room. "She's going to want to know about her mama someday," Dorothy said. "What will you tell her?" Dorothy was quiet for a moment, watching Hope chase pigeons in Jackson Square. "I'll tell her that Janelle Washington was the bravest person I ever knew, that she fought for her daughter until her very last breath. That love doesn't end just because someone dies." That evening, Lorraine sat in her hotel room reviewing her testimony for the 100th time. Tomorrow she'd fly back to Atlanta to continue working with prosecutors. In 3 months, she'd face Bradley Whitmore in court and tell the world exactly what she'd found behind that bathroom wall. The thought still scared her. Bradley's lawyers would try to discredit her, to paint her as an opportunist seeking fame and money. They'd dissect her life, her finances, her choices. But they couldn't change the facts. They couldn't erase Janelle's journal or explain away the hidden room or justify 37 women's disappearances. Most importantly, they couldn't silence Hope Washington's right to know the truth about her mother. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter Keisha, now 9 years old and proud to tell her classmates that her mom was helping put bad people in jail. "Mama, when are you coming home? I miss you." "Soon, baby. Just a few more things to finish." "Are you helping more kids find their families?" Lorraine smiled, thinking about all the children who'd been reunited with relatives they'd thought were lost forever. "Yes, I am." "Good. I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby girl." Outside her window, New Orleans glittered in the darkness, a city that understood resilience, survival, and the power of community. It was the perfect place for Hope Washington to grow up, surrounded by people who knew that storms could destroy buildings, but they couldn't break the human spirit. Tomorrow, the fight for justice would continue. But tonight, Lorraine allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. They'd won, not just the legal battles, but something more important. They'd given Hope Washington a future free from her father's lies. And they'd made sure Janelle Washington's love story would never be forgotten. Have you ever seen how one person's courage can inspire an entire movement for change? Have you ever watched a community come together to protect the most vulnerable among them? Tell me in the comments about a time when ordinary people did extraordinary things to fight injustice. Because sometimes the most powerful force in the world isn't money or influence. It's love refusing to be silenced. The federal courthouse in Atlanta had never seen anything like the Bradley Whitmore trial. Media trucks lined the streets, protesters held vigils for the victims, and survivors traveled from across the country to witness justice being served. Lorraine sat in the witness box, looking directly at the man who'd tried to have her killed. Bradley wore an expensive suit despite being in custody, his lawyers having fought for his right to appear respectable before the jury. But the orange jumpsuit underneath was visible at the collar, a reminder of where he truly belonged. "Miss Tucker," Prosecutor David Kim began, "please tell the jury what you discovered on the evening of February 15th at the defendant's Buckhead residence." Lorraine had rehearsed this testimony dozens of times, but facing Bradley in person made her voice shake initially. Then she thought about Hope, now walking and calling Dorothy grandmama, and her voice steadied. "I found a baby hidden behind a false wall in the master bathroom. A 6-month-old girl who'd been living in secret, isolated from the world." "And what did you find with the infant?" "Evidence. Journals written by her mother, Janelle Washington. Bank records. Medical files. A phone with text messages showing systematic control and manipulation." Bradley's defense attorney, Jonathan Pierce, was one of Atlanta's most expensive lawyers. During cross-examination, he tried every angle to discredit Lorraine's testimony. "Miss Tucker, isn't it true that you were facing financial difficulties at the time you allegedly discovered this child?" "I was struggling, yes, like millions of other working people." "And isn't it true that you saw an opportunity for financial gain by concocting this elaborate story?" Lorraine looked at the jury, 12 ordinary people who would decide Bradley's fate. "Sir, I risked my life to save that baby. I had death threats, lost my job, had to live in hiding for months. If I wanted money, there were easier ways to get it than crossing one of the most powerful men in Georgia." Pierce tried to paint her as an opportunist, but the evidence was overwhelming. Janelle's journal, authenticated by handwriting experts. Medical records showing Hope's treatment in the hidden facility. Security footage from the Buckhead mansion showing Bradley entering and leaving at times he claimed to be out of town. But the most damaging testimony came from the survivors themselves. Carmen Rodriguez took the stand wearing a simple black dress, her voice clear and strong as she described meeting Bradley during hurricane relief efforts in Miami. He seemed like a savior at first, someone who genuinely wanted to help people rebuild their lives. But gradually, the help came with conditions. "I couldn't work, couldn't see friends, couldn't make decisions about my own life." "What happened when you became pregnant?" Kim asked. Carmen's voice broke slightly. "He said I wasn't fit to be a mother, that my background, my struggles, made me dangerous to the child. He had doctors who backed up his claims, social workers who agreed with his assessment." Where's your child now? My daughter Maria is 14. Until 6 months ago, she believed I'd abandoned her for drugs. She's been living with people who told her I was dead. Pierce tried to suggest that Carmen was an unfit mother, that Bradley had genuinely been protecting her child. But FBI financial records showed payments to the very doctors and social workers who declared her incompetent, payments that coincided exactly with their evaluations. The pattern held across all the cases. Vulnerable women, systematic isolation, fabricated mental health crises, and children removed through a network of corrupt officials. Shanice Williams testified about losing her son after Hurricane Katrina. Teresa Martinez described watching her twins taken away after she threatened to leave Bradley. Each story followed the same devastating template. But the most powerful moment came when Dorothy Washington took the stand. At 73, she commanded the courtroom like the teacher she'd been for 40 years. When Pierce tried to suggest that Janelle had been unstable, Dorothy's response silenced the entire room. "Young man, I raised that girl from the age of 12. I watched her work 3 jobs to put herself through school. I watched her volunteer at homeless shelters on weekends. I watched her save every penny to help rebuild New Orleans after Katrina." Her voice rose with righteous anger. "You want to call her unstable? The only unstable thing about my granddaughter's life was that man sitting right there, who preyed on women during the worst moments of their lives." Dorothy looked directly at Bradley, unflinching. "Janelle Washington died trying to save her daughter from you. She documented everything because she knew you'd try to erase her story. But love doesn't disappear just because you kill the person who felt it." The defense's case crumbled under the weight of evidence. Pierce called character witnesses who testified to Bradley's charitable work, but prosecutors countered with victims who showed the reality behind his philanthropy. Expert witnesses explained how predators often use charitable work as cover, how they identify vulnerable targets through disaster relief and social services. Psychologists described the manipulation tactics Bradley had used to control his victims. But the most damning evidence came from Bradley's own records, the trophy collection found in his vault, the detailed files on every woman he'd targeted, the handwritten ledger tracking his acquisitions. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Kim said in his closing argument, "this case isn't complicated. Bradley Whitmore is a predator who spent 25 years hunting vulnerable women, stealing their children, and erasing their existence when they became inconvenient." He held up a photo of Janelle Washington, young and smiling before she met Bradley. Janelle Washington was a survivor who became a victim. But through her courage in documenting her story, through the bravery of Lorraine Tucker in speaking truth to power, and through the love of Dorothy Washington in fighting for her family, Janelle's voice was not silenced. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood to read the verdict. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit human trafficking, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of murder in the first degree in the death of Janelle Washington, we find the defendant guilty." The verdicts continued. Guilty on 37 counts of kidnapping, 15 counts of human trafficking, 8 counts of murder, dozens of counts of conspiracy and corruption. Bradley Whitmore showed no emotion as his life sentence was read. But in the gallery, survivors and family members wept with relief. Justice had finally come for the man who thought wealth and power made him untouchable. After the trial, Lorraine stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters, survivors, and advocates who'd made the conviction possible. "This victory belongs to every woman who refused to be silenced," she said. "To every family member who never stopped searching. To every person who believed that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible." In New Orleans, Dorothy Washington watched the coverage while Hope played at her feet, too young to understand that history was being made. But someday, Hope would know that her mother's love had brought down one of the most dangerous predators in American history. And that love, once awakened, could never be silenced. Have you ever seen justice triumph over overwhelming power and corruption? Have you ever watched ordinary people defeat someone who seemed untouchable? Share your thoughts in the comments about what this victory means. Because the Bradley Whitmore case proved that even the most carefully constructed lies eventually crumble when confronted with truth. 2 years after Bradley Whitmore's conviction, Lorraine Tucker stood before a congressional committee in Washington, D.C., testifying about legislation that would close the loopholes predators had used to exploit vulnerable families. The Janelle Washington Protection Act isn't just about preventing future victims, she told the packed hearing room. It's about acknowledging that our current systems failed women and children for decades. The proposed legislation would require federal oversight of private adoption agencies, mandate background checks for all personnel involved in child welfare cases, and create a national database to track suspicious patterns in custody decisions. But more importantly, it would provide resources for survivors, counseling, legal aid, family reunification services, and educational opportunities for children who'd been stolen from their families. Hope Washington will grow up knowing her mother's story, Lorraine continued. But there are still children out there who believe their mothers abandoned them, who don't know they were stolen. This legislation will help find them and bring them home. Congressman Michael Davis from Georgia had initially opposed the bill, arguing it would create unnecessary bureaucracy. But after meeting Hope and Dorothy, his position changed completely. Sometimes it takes a personal story to make policymakers understand the human cost of systemic failures, he said during the hearing. The Bradley Whitmore case exposed a network of corruption that operated for decades because we weren't paying attention to the most vulnerable members of our society. The legislation passed both houses of Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support. The signing ceremony took place in the Rose Garden, with Dorothy holding Hope while the president put his signature to the bill that would bear Janelle Washington's name. This law won't bring back the women we lost, the president said, but it will help ensure that their children know the truth about their mother's love. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of Bradley's conviction continued to spread. Investigations into his network of corrupt officials had led to indictments in 8 states. Judges who'd rubber-stamped custody transfers, social workers who'd falsified reports, doctors who'd provided fake psychiatric evaluations, all faced federal charges. The children's recovery and reunification process was ongoing. Marcus Williams, now 19, had graduated high school and started college with a scholarship fund created by Bradley's liquidated assets. He'd chosen to study social work, wanting to help other survivors heal from family trauma. "I can't get back the years I lost believing my mother abandoned me," he told Lorraine during a recent visit. "But I can make sure other kids don't go through what I went through." The younger children were adapting better. 3-year-old Sophia Martinez barely remembered the lies she'd been told about her mother, and she was thriving with her grandmother in Florida. The Rodriguez twins had reconnected with their extended family and were doing well in school. But healing was complicated and ongoing. Many of the survivors struggled with trust issues, depression, and the psychological impact of learning their entire lives had been built on lies. Support groups met regularly in cities across the country. Survivors helping survivors, families sharing resources and strategies for moving forward. The Bradley Whitmore case had created a community of people committed to preventing similar tragedies. Lorraine found herself traveling frequently, speaking at conferences, training social workers, and advocating for policy changes. Her daughter, Keisha, now 11, often complained about her mother's busy schedule. "I'm proud of what you did, Mama," Keisha said one evening as they walked through their Atlanta neighborhood. "But I miss when it was just us." Lorraine understood. The past 2 years had been overwhelming. Media attention, legal proceedings, congressional testimony. Sometimes she missed the simple days of cleaning houses and helping with homework. But then she'd receive a letter from a survivor who'd found her family, or a photo of Hope taking her first steps in Dorothy's backyard, and she'd remember why the work mattered. "What I learned from this whole experience," Lorraine told a room full of social work students at Emory University, "is that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they refuse to look away from injustice." She showed them a recent photo of Hope, now 2.5 years old, playing in Dorothy's garden in New Orleans. This little girl will grow up knowing she was loved, knowing her mother died fighting for her, knowing that people care enough to seek justice. That's not everything. It doesn't bring Janelle back, but it's something. The students asked thoughtful questions about recognizing warning signs, about supporting vulnerable families, about creating systems that protect rather than exploit. The most important thing, Lorraine concluded, is to remember that behind every case file, every statistic, every policy debate, there are real people whose lives hang in the balance. When we stop seeing people as human beings deserving of dignity and protection, we create the conditions for predators to thrive. After her speech, a young social work student approached her with tears in her eyes. "My little sister was adopted when I was 10, she said. We were told our mother couldn't care for us, that she'd sign away her rights. But after hearing your story, I'm wondering if we were told the truth." Lorraine gave her the contact information for organizations that helped adoptees search for their biological families. Cases like Bradley's were rare, but the principles of family preservation and transparent adoption practices applied broadly. Later that week, Lorraine received a call that made her day. "Miss Tucker, this is Agent Shun with the FBI. We found another one. Another child, and this time the mother is alive. Jennifer Ross in Seattle. She's been searching for her son for 8 years. We found him living with Bradley's associates in Oregon. The reunions never got easier to watch. 8-year-old Tommy Ross had been told his mother was dead, killed in a car accident when he was an infant. Learning she was alive, that she'd never stopped looking for him, was overwhelming for both mother and son. But Jennifer Ross's tears of joy as she held her son for the first time in 8 years reminded Lorraine why the work was worth every sacrifice.
"I knew he was out there somewhere," Jennifer sobbed. "I knew he was alive. Everyone told me I was crazy, that I needed to move on, but I could feel it in my heart." The Bradley Whitmore case had officially ended with his conviction, but its impact would continue for decades. Children would grow up with their real families. Laws would protect vulnerable women from predators. Support systems would help survivors heal. And in New Orleans, Hope Washington would grow up surrounded by love, knowing her mother's courage had changed the world. "Mama Janelle loved you so much," Dorothy told Hope every night as she tucked her into bed. "She made sure you'd be safe, even though she couldn't stay to watch you grow up." Hope was too young to understand the full story, but she understood love. She understood safety. She understood that she belonged with Dorothy, in this house full of photographs and stories about the brave young woman who'd given her life. Someday, Hope would read her mother's journal and understand the depth of Janelle's sacrifice. She'd learn about Lorraine Tucker, the weekend maid who'd refused to look away. She'd know about all the people who'd fought to bring her home. But for now, she was simply a toddler playing in her great-grandmother's garden, free from the darkness that had once threatened to swallow her whole. The sound of her laughter echoed through the New Orleans afternoon. The sound of victory over evil. The sound of love refusing to be silenced. The sound of justice finally done. Have you ever seen how one act of courage can create waves of change that last for generations? Have you ever witnessed how speaking truth to power can transform systems and save lives? Tell me in the comments about the changes you'd like to see in the world, because the Bradley Whitmore case proved that ordinary people, when they refuse to accept injustice, have the power to move mountains. 5 years after that February night, when Lorraine heard a baby crying in Bradley Whitmore's mansion, she stood in a packed auditorium at the Janelle Washington Center for Family Justice in Atlanta, watching Dorothy present Hope with a special certificate. "This is for being the bravest little girl I know," Dorothy said, her voice carrying across the room filled with survivors, advocates, and families who'd been reunited through their work. Hope, now 5 years old and starting kindergarten, beamed as she held the certificate proclaiming her an honorary ambassador for family love. She looked exactly like the photos Dorothy kept of Janelle at the same age: bright eyes, infectious smile, and a spirit that couldn't be dimmed. The Janelle Washington Center had grown from Dorothy's dream into a national organization providing resources for trafficking survivors, family reunification services, and training for social workers to recognize and prevent family separation schemes. Lorraine served as executive director, a role that had evolved naturally from her advocacy work. Her daughter Keisha, now 16, volunteered at the center after school and had already declared her intention to study social work in college. "My mom saved Hope," Keisha often told visitors during tours. "But Hope saved my mom too. She gave her a purpose bigger than any of us imagined." It was true. The scared, financially struggling single mother who'd cleaned Bradley's house 5 years ago had transformed into a national advocate whose testimony before Congress had changed federal law. But the core of who she was remained the same, someone who refused to look away when children needed protection. The center's main conference room was lined with photographs of success stories. Marcus Williams, now a graduate student in social work. Sophia Martinez, thriving in middle school. The Rodriguez twins, both honor students and accomplished soccer players. Jennifer Ross and her son Tommy, reunited and building new memories together. But there were also photos of the women who hadn't survived to see justice. Janelle Washington, Regina Williams, and 10 others whose deaths had been directly linked to Bradley's network. Their pictures served as a reminder of the cost of silence, the price of looking away when vulnerable people needed help. Bradley Whitmore had died in federal prison 3 months ago, apparently from heart attack. Some of the survivors felt cheated of their chance to face him again in appeals court. Others, like Dorothy, found peace in knowing he could never hurt another family. "Janelle's not here to see Hope grow up," Dorothy had said at the time. "But knowing that man can never destroy another mother's love, that's something." The day's ceremony was celebrating the 5th anniversary of the center's founding and the graduation of their first class of family advocates. People who'd been trained to work within the system to prevent family separations and support reunification efforts. Lorraine looked around the room at faces she'd come to know well over the past 5 years. Federal agents who'd become friends, lawyers who'd donated thousands of hours of pro bono work, journalists who'd kept the story alive when powerful people wanted it to disappear. Marcus Chun was there with his wife and new baby daughter, whom they'd named Janelle in honor of the woman whose story had launched Marcus's investigative career. He'd won a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage of the case, and now ran a nonprofit focused on investigative journalism about family separation and trafficking. Agent Sarah Chun had been promoted to head the FBI's Human Trafficking Unit and credited the Bradley Whitmore case with revolutionizing how federal agencies approached family separation crimes. But the most important people in the room were the survivors and their families. People who'd refused to be silenced, who'd found the courage to tell their stories despite the personal cost. "When I first heard Hope crying behind that wall," Lorraine told the assembled crowd, "I thought I was just saving one baby. I had no idea I was uncovering something that would change so many lives." She looked at Hope, sitting in the front row between Dorothy and Keisha, wearing a yellow dress that Dorothy had sewn by hand. Hope Washington will grow up knowing her mother's story. Not the lies Bradley Whitmore told about Janelle, but the truth about a brave young woman who loved her daughter enough to document everything, even when she knew it might cost her life. The audience was quiet, many wiping away tears as Lorraine continued. Janelle's journal saved Hope, but it did more than that. It saved Marcus Williams, who learned his mother wasn't a drug addict, but a nursing student who died looking for him. It saved Sophia Martinez, who discovered her mother wasn't a criminal, but a college graduate who'd been murdered for trying to stay in her daughter's life. She paused, looking around the room at all the lives that had been changed by one woman's decision to write down her story. It saved all of us because it proved that love doesn't end when someone dies. Love persists. Love fights. Love refuses to be erased, no matter how much money and power try to silence it. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a new addition to the center, a memorial garden dedicated to the women who died in Bradley's network. Each victim was represented by a tree, with a plaque telling their story and celebrating their role as mothers who'd fought for their children. Janelle Washington's tree was in the center, surrounded by colorful flowers that Hope had helped plant. The plaque read, "Janelle Washington, beloved daughter, devoted mother, and courageous woman who documented truth so justice could prevail." Her love saved her daughter and changed the world. After the ceremony, Lorraine found herself standing alone in the memorial garden with Hope, who was carefully watering the flowers around her mother's tree. "Miss Lorraine," Hope said, looking up with serious 5-year-old eyes, "Grandmama says my mama is watching from heaven. Do you think she can see me taking care of her flowers?" Lorraine knelt down beside Hope, thinking about Janelle's journal entries filled with dreams for her daughter's future. "I think your mama can see everything you do, sweetheart. And I think she's very proud of the brave, kind, smart little girl you're becoming." Hope nodded solemnly, then brightened. "When I grow up, I want to help kids find their mamas, just like you did for me." "That's a beautiful goal, Hope. Your mama would love knowing you want to help other families." As they walked back toward the center, Hope slipped her small hand into Lorraine's. "Miss Lorraine, thank you for hearing me cry that night." The simple words hit Lorraine like a physical blow. This child, who'd grown up surrounded by love and truth instead of lies and isolation, understood exactly what had happened that February night 5 years ago. "Thank you for being brave enough to cry loud enough for someone to hear," Lorraine replied. That evening, Lorraine sat in her apartment with Keisha, reviewing application for the center's expansion into 3 new cities. The demand for their services remained overwhelming. Too many families still separated by systems that prioritize paperwork over people, too many children still believing lies about parents who'd love them. But progress was being made. The Janelle Washington Protection Act had prevented dozens of fraudulent custody cases. Training programs were helping social workers recognize manipulation tactics. Support networks were providing resources for survivors to rebuild their lives. "Mom," Keisha said, looking up from her homework, "do you ever regret that night?" Everything that happened after. Lorraine considered the question carefully. The past 5 years have been difficult. Death threats, financial struggles, constant travel, the weight of representing so many families seeking justice. But then she thought about Hope Washington, sleeping peacefully in Dorothy's house in New Orleans, surrounded by photographs and stories about her mother's love. She thought about Marcus Williams, helping other separated families navigate the reunification process. She thought about all the children who'd learned the truth about parents who died fighting for them. "No regrets," she said finally. "Some things are more important than our own comfort." Her phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. "Hope wants to know if you'll read her a story over video call before bed. It's about a brave lady who saves children." Lorraine smiled, already reaching for her laptop. "Tell her I'll be right there." Because that's what family did. They showed up for each other, even across distance, even after trauma, even when the world seemed determined to tear them apart. And that's what Janelle Washington's love had created. Not just justice for her own daughter, but a family of survivors committed to making sure no child would ever again have to grow up believing they were unwanted or unloved. Have you ever seen how one person's courage can create a legacy that lasts generations? Have you ever watched love triumph over evil in ways that seemed impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments about what the word family means to you, because the Bradley Whitmore case proved that family isn't just about blood relations. Sometimes family is about people who refuse to let you disappear. 10 years after Lorraine Tucker heard a baby crying behind a bathroom wall, she stood in the United Nations building in New York, addressing the General Assembly about global efforts to combat child trafficking and family separation. Hope Washington, now 10 years old, sat in the gallery next to Dorothy, both wearing matching dresses Dorothy had made for the special occasion. Hope was old enough now to understand the significance of these moments, that her story had become part of something much bigger than one family's tragedy. The case of Bradley Whitmore revealed that predators don't just exist in shadowy criminal organizations, Lorraine told the international audience. They hide behind charitable work, political connections, and social respectability. They target the most vulnerable members of our society, displaced women, minorities, the economically disadvantaged, because they know these victims are least likely to be believed or missed. In the decades since Bradley's arrest, the Janelle Washington Protection Act had been adopted by 17 countries, and international protocols for family reunification had been strengthened significantly. But the most meaningful changes were happening in individual lives. Marcus Williams had graduated with his master's degree in social work and was now running his own nonprofit focused on helping trafficked children transition back into society. He'd married his college girlfriend, and they were expecting their first child, a daughter they planned to name Janelle. "I want my daughter to know about the woman whose courage saved so many families," Marcus had told Lorraine. "Janelle Washington died fighting for justice. The least I can do is make sure her name lives on." Sophia Martinez, now 13, was an honor student and active in her school's peer counseling program. She maintained a close relationship with her grandmother while also developing friendships with other survivors for Bradley's network. The Rodriguez twins had both been accepted to college with full scholarships, their academic success a testament to what children could achieve when surrounded by love instead of lies. Jennifer Ross and her son Tommy had written a book about their reunion experience, becoming advocates for adoptee rights and family preservation policies. Each success story represented a life that could have been lost forever if Lorraine hadn't been brave enough to speak up that February night. But Hope Washington remained the center of it all, the child whose rescue had exposed a network of evil and created a movement for justice. Now a fourth grader at a New Orleans elementary school, Hope was a confident, articulate child who understood her unique place in history. She regularly spoke to children's groups about family love and never meeting strangers, carrying on her mother's legacy in age-appropriate ways. "My mama couldn't stay to raise me," Hope would tell younger children during safety presentations, "but she made sure I'd be safe with people who loved me. And Miss Lorraine heard me crying and made sure I got home to Grandmama." The simplicity of her explanation belied the complexity of the case that had changed federal law and international policy. But Hope's perspective remained beautifully uncomplicated. Love wins, good people help each other, and families stick together no matter what. Dorothy, now 83, had become something of a celebrity in her own right. Her Facebook Live video confronting Bradley's gunman had been viewed over 50 million times and studied in crisis management courses worldwide. But she remained most proud of her role as Hope's guardian and the keeper of Janelle's memory. "Every day with Hope is a gift Janelle gave us," Dorothy often said. "She fought so hard to make sure her baby would be loved and protected. When I look at Hope, I see Janelle's spirit, strong, kind, determined to help other people." The memorial garden at the Janelle Washington Center had expanded to honor all 37 women identified as victims of Bradley's network. Each tree was thriving, tended by volunteers who included survivors, family members, and community supporters. Hope visited her mother's tree every few weeks, updating Janelle on her school progress, her friendships, her dreams for the future. "Mama, I got an A on my history project about brave women," she said during her most recent visit. "I wrote about you and Miss Lorraine and Grandmama." Mrs. Peterson said it was the best presentation she'd ever seen. Lorraine, now 45, had never remarried. Her focus remained on her work at the center and raising Keisha, who was now a junior at Spelman College studying social work and international human rights. "Mom changed the world by refusing to ignore a crying baby," Keisha often told her classmates. "It makes me think about all the times we walk past problems assuming someone else will handle them." The center had grown into a national organization with offices in 12 cities and partnerships with international agencies. They'd helped reunite over 300 families and train thousands of social workers, law enforcement officers, and community advocates to recognize and prevent family separation schemes. But Lorraine's proudest achievement was the relationship she'd maintained with Hope and Dorothy. They'd become her second family, bound together not by blood, but by shared experience and mutual love. "Miss Lorraine is my bonus mama," Hope would tell people, a designation that always made Lorraine's heart swell with pride. The UN speech marked another milestone in what had become Lorraine's international advocacy career. After her presentation, delegates from 6 countries requested consultations about implementing family preservation policies in their own nations. During the reception afterward, Lorraine was approached by a young woman who looked vaguely familiar. "Ms. Tucker, my name is Maria Santos. I think you saved my life when I was 3 years old. Lorraine's breath caught. Maria Santos had been one of the first children recovered from Bradley's network, a toddler found living with associates in Phoenix who'd been told her mother was a drug addict. Maria? Oh my goodness, look at you. Now 23 and a recent law school graduate, Maria had grown into a poised young woman with her mother's eyes and an unmistakable strength. I wanted to thank you, Maria continued, not just for finding me, but for making sure I learned the truth about my mother. Carmen raised me to understand that she never abandoned me, that she fought for me until the very end. Carmen Rodriguez had survived Bradley's network and been reunited with Maria, but the years of separation had taken their toll. She died of cancer 2 years earlier, but not before seeing her daughter graduate from college with honors. She used to say that meeting you gave her hope again, Maria told Lorraine. You showed her that someone cared about women like us, families like ours. Stories like Maria's reinforced why Lorraine's work mattered. Every policy change, every training session, every late night spent reviewing case files, it all came down to individual families being protected and preserved. The next morning, Lorraine flew back to Atlanta to prepare for the center's biggest fundraising gala yet. The evening would honor survivors, celebrate successes, and raise money to expand services to rural communities where trafficking often went undetected. But first, she had a video call scheduled with Hope, who wanted to show off a school project about family trees. Look, Miss Lorraine. Hope held up a poster covered with photographs and drawings. I put Mama Janelle at the top because she's watching over all of us. Then Grandmama, then you and Miss Keisha, then all my friend from the center. The family tree included Marcus Williams, Sophia Martinez, the Rodriguez twins, and dozens of other survivors who'd stayed connected over the years. What had started as a criminal investigation had evolved into an extended family bonded by shared experience and mutual support. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Your mama will be so proud of how you think about family. Miss Lorraine, when I grow up, I want to work at the center like you do. I want to help other kids find their real families. It was a conversation they'd had many times over the years. Hope's determination to continue her moth.
You know what, Hope? I think you're going to change the world just like your mama did. Maybe even more. After ending the call, Lorraine sat in her office, surrounded by photographs, awards, and letters from families who'd been helped by the center. On her desk was Janelle's original journal, now encased in protective covering, but still readable, still telling the story of a young mother's love and determination. The journal had become the center's most precious artifact, displayed in a place of honor where visitors could read excerpts and understand how one woman's courage had created a movement for justice. But for Lorraine, the journal remained what it had always been, evidence that love persists beyond death, that truth eventually triumphs over lies, and that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they refuse to look away from injustice. Her assistant knocked on the door with a stack of new case files. Families seeking help, survivors looking for relatives, children who'd been told lies about their parents' love. The work continued. It would always continue, because predators would always exist and vulnerable families would always need protection. But now there were systems in place to help them, laws that protected them, communities that supported them, and advocates who understood that behind every case file was a real person deserving of dignity and love. Lorraine opened the first file and began reading about a young mother in Texas whose child had been taken under suspicious circumstances. The details were different, but the pattern was familiar: systematic isolation, fabricated mental health concerns, corrupt officials rubber-stamping custody transfers. She reached for her phone to call the FBI task force that now specialized in family separation crimes. The Bradley Whitmore case had created protocols, relationships, and resources that made investigations more efficient and effective. Justice moved faster now. Families were reunited sooner. Children learned the truth about their parents' love before years of lies could take root. Outside her window, Atlanta bustled with afternoon traffic and daily life. Somewhere in the city, vulnerable families were struggling with poverty, displacement, and the challenges that made them targets for predators. But they were no longer defenseless. The Janelle Washington Protection Act had given them legal shields. The center had given them advocates. The survivor community had given them proof that healing was possible. And in New Orleans, Hope Washington was growing up surrounded by love, truth, and the knowledge that her mother's sacrifice had changed the world. The sound that had started it all, a baby crying behind a bathroom wall, had become something much more powerful. The sound of justice, the sound of families being reunited, the sound of love refusing to be silenced. 10 years later, that sound still echoed in every life that was saved, every truth that was told, every child who grew up knowing they were wanted and loved. Janelle Washington had died trying to save her daughter. But through Hope's rescue, she had saved countless others. Children who would never know her name, but whose lives were forever changed by her courage. That was the legacy of love. It multiplied, it endured, and it changed the world one family at a time. Have you ever seen how one person's sacrifice can create ripples that change generations? Have you ever witnessed how love can triumph over the most carefully constructed evil? Share your thoughts in the comments about the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change, because the story of Hope Washington proves that heroes aren't just found in movies. They're found in weekend maids who refuse to ignore a crying baby, in grandmothers who stand up to armed killers, and in communities that refuse to let vulnerable families disappear. Sometimes the most powerful force in the world is simply someone who cares enough to listen, to act, and to never give up on justice. And that sound, the sound of love refusing to be silenced, continues to echo wherever people choose courage over comfort, truth over silence, and justice over indifference. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the vulnerable families in your own community, if it inspired you to believe that ordinary people can create extraordinary change, then hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us of our shared humanity. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in the power of love over evil, hope over despair, and justice over corruption. And remember, somewhere in your community, there might be a child whose cry for help is waiting to be heard. The question isn't whether you have the power to help. It's whether you have the courage to listen. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, keep fighting for justice, keep believing in love, and keep listening for the sounds that need to be heard. #TheSoundOfSecrets.